Right, folks, welcome. We are live on Telegram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, as well as Rumble. Today we have a special guest going to be joining us, Dr. Sky, Stephen Cates, known for his appearances on Coast to Coast AM and several other broadcast shows. With that being said, let me do our little intro, and then we will play let me read the disclaimer, then we'll play the intro, and we'll bring him on. This is episode 1 of season 2 of Campaign for America. The views expressed on this show are expressly the views of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views, beliefs, or opinions of News for Us World, its hosts, broadcasters, or affiliates. Remember, folks, always use your own discernment when viewing. We encourage our viewers to think for themselves. Welcome, everyone. We are here live, and we're going to be having a very special guest on today in just a few moments. So with that being said, let me play our intro, and then we can bring him on.
In 1980, Ronald Reagan wore a white suit, a red tie, and a white shirt and addressed the nation. Hi, I am Dennis Andrew Ball, and I am running for President of the United States. I am talking to you right now because the debates that were conducted this week need to have a presidential response. The economic issues that both Barack Obama and Mitt Romney answered created in the minds of many of us unanswered questions of how do you sustain economic growth in the United States of America. In light of the decisions and the events that have happened since 2008, what do we need to do to reduce the deficit, increase job creation, maintain Social Security and Medicare, and provide the opportunity for our children and future generations not only to survive, but to thrive in a global economy. I would like to talk to you quickly on how I perceive what needs to happen. The United States of America at this time is suffering because the means of production have not equaled the ends of production that it requires in order to sustain its middle class. The United States of America must reindustrialize itself to make it possible that 23 million Americans can go back to work in industries that are productive for themselves and their families. What we are witnessing on a daily basis is the demise of the American family, the traditional American family, of children, parents, and grandparents, by people in authority who have used, abused, and misused their positions to hurt our people. This must stop, and it will under my administration. The need at this moment of time is to get our organs of power in business to invest in research and development to make it possible for industry to not only survive in America, but also to thrive. My attitude is that the production capability of the United States is equal to none. Our workers are very productive if given the opportunity, but they must be protected by government that concerns themselves with their best interests. And that has been a problem for many years in this country. My attitude also is that in order for our people to get themselves in a position to care for themselves and their children, we have to evaluate at this moment in time what is important for that to happen. And I believe that it will be more of a decision on the part of the American people when they go to the voting booth to decide who they think is best qualified to do that job. I believe also that we are in a position to make decisions that will impact the course of history and to bring about positive change in the lives of our family structure. I want to say that in order to do that, the means of production will have to be a top priority to reindustrialize the middle class and to provide the support for the future generations. I want to say this, that in terms of how we go about this business, the President of the United States should be very aware of what has happened and what needs to happen. My interest at this time is to educate through my administration of candidacy for presidency to make it possible for you to learn more about me and to decide if you are better off since the election of Barack Obama and the changes that need to happen in terms of the increase in gas prices, in food prices, the mortgage forfeitures that have happened since him, and also what we will do in the future to make it possible for more people to be employed out of 23 million who are not. Consider this opportunity to communicate to your friends and your neighbors my thoughts, and I look forward to hearing from you. I need presidential electors who will vote for me through the Electoral College when I win the states in this country to become your next president. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
All right, Dennis, would you like to do a little bit of housekeeping real quick while I get the call-in line and call our guest on? Unmute yourself.
Thank you, Stephen. We are here, people. Today, this is the second season, episode 1 of the Campaign for America, Ball for All 2024, Ball Sanders 2024, the AOA, ANC.org. We are making history. I hope everyone had a decent Christmas. I hope that you had a decent New Year's. Happy New Year. Ever since the New Year has come, since the 2nd of January, we have been very busy here on a lot of different topics with different media people, gaining traction now for the months of January, February, and March to create events for the media to cover the stories. Today's guest is Stephen Cates, aka Dr.Sky, a celebrated personality in the entertainment industry. It was Steve who I met 12 years ago in Phoenix, Arizona, and haven't stopped. A brilliant ideologue, very powerful personality who has created radio programs and continues to make a statement wherever he is heard. And so for that, I want to say I am honored to have him as our guest today, the first episode of the second season. That's a milestone for me personally. And I thank you, Stephen Phillips, for giving us this opportunity to bring about change through this campaign and campaigns in the future. We're very busy here in Florida. We'll continue on here. You'll hear more about it in the upcoming episodes of the Campaign for America. And so with that, I want to turn it back over to you for Steve Cates to come on, and we can proceed from there.
All right, I'm calling him now. All righty, here we go.
You may want to.
Hello, Mr. Cates. How are you doing today? I see you made it on here.
Doing well, sir.
Good. Can you hear him okay, Dennis?
I can. Did you want to put his picture up? He had sent me, and I forwarded it to you.
I do.
But I'm
right here on my overlay.
That's perfect. Okay.
Every time I speak.
Hold on, let me fix that.
Okay.
Yes, Steve. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Campaign for America.
Good afternoon.
And I have given an introduction about your history and your biography. Tell the audience a little bit more about that, because I'm not real clear on some of this myself. I know that you have it very well spoken, the way you want it said, and I want you to have that opportunity.
Well, Dennis, good evening to you and the listeners. I just wanted to highlight that for the last 40, 50 years, I've been a broadcaster from television and radio based here in Arizona. The short version is I've been doing a show over the last 15 years called A Call to Right. Our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, Second Amendment, and also proud to be Dr. Sky around the nation on some big platforms. Our home is Talk Radio 77 WABC out of New York, and a regular contributor for over 15 years on the largest radio show at night across America, coast to coast. But without going too further into this, I just wanted to mention that the reason I'm here today is to talk with Dennis about his campaign for America, and equally important, to identify that I'm neither Republican nor Democrat, but a common sense conservative. And I think it's so important to share the issues that Dennis is striving for in his campaign, which I think mimics so many of the things that we'll talk about that he believes in.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate the input there. And as far as I'm concerned, you're an American, your family first. If you're not fighting for your family, who are you working for? And like we spoke today earlier, the concept or the reality of democracy versus a republic. I know that's an issue that you want to delve into a little bit and express your opinions, concerns, your passion. And I think this is really what's important. Also, if you want, we can talk about the invasion on the southern border, all of these illegals coming over into the United States without any accountability. Can you tell us about that too?
Well, Dennis, I want to start off with the whole definition of what of what we believe is a democracy that we hear so much in legacy media, and I think they have it all wrong. I mean, again, the party that I'm kind of beaming this toward is relentless, repetition of the word democracy. We hear that our democracy is in peril if Trump takes over as a pseudo dictator or a Nazi, which is totally ludicrous. So here we go. A direct democracy is simply a democracy in which the electorate decides on the policies and initiatives without the elected representatives as the proxies. So we are a constitutional republic. Why then don't we hear this version? Here it is. We are a constitutional republic, which refers to the fact that the government of the United States is based on the Constitution and is the supreme law of the United States. So legacy media keeps pounding this concept into people's heads that their democracy is under attack. This is not where the population just decides exactly what they want without representation. So let's be honest, that's a definitive distinction, and that's a legal description. So how about that?
Oh, you say it so well, Steve. I mean, the realities are our nation was founded on a constitution that was bled and died for.
Right.
The issue is right now is, and I've said this with other people on other platforms and other radio shows. I've asked the question: can a third party candidate become president of the United States? And the question becomes also, if they take an oath to the Constitution, which was given to the people to protect the people, but then they violate that Constitution, we have no Constitution. It's actually been suspended. A suspended Constitution, even though they take an oath to the Constitution. Therein lies, to me.
And that's exactly right. Look, let's put it this way. January 20th, which will be occurring in a couple of weeks. In a year from now, we will have someone standing there at the footsteps of the Capitol, taking the same oath that you're talking about,
Right.
about defending and upholding the Constitution.
Right.
So help me God.
Exactly.
So let's look at it this way. I don't care who that individual is as president, but if they are violating the very tenet of the literal wording of that oath, there's a serious problem.
Yes, there is.
Who's speaking out to have accountability for the violation of that? Because here's the problem. This may sound a little alarming to many listeners out there. It's not just the politicians that are at fault. How can anybody who doesn't understand the Constitution or know how many people have lost their lives and fought for freedom,
right,
when they buy into this very, very bad experience and not challenge or hold accountable the people who violated the Constitution? It's common sense.
You know, you make a really good point there, Steve, because you're absolutely right. Ultimately, what it comes down to is that we, the people, are responsible for allowing our apathy to continue and allowing it to get this bad, because ultimately it falls to us.
Yes.
We have an obligation and a civic duty to speak out if we see this kind of activity going on. And if we're not, well, it just goes back to the famous quote, you know, all it takes for evil to succeed is for good men and women to do nothing.
You're right, Stephen. And I just want to say something. I'm getting a terrible echo of everything I say to you.
All right, let me try
coming back in my headset.
I wasn't sure,
which is a little bit difficult.
That's all right. I'm gonna try and mute the voice calling. Just give me a second. Tell me if you can, if it's better here. 1 second. How is it now?
Can you hear, Steve?
I know through the marvels of electronics that sometimes is, you know, I'm still getting the feedback, but
okay.
Well, that's okay.
I'm going to bring my mic, the input volume level down a bit. So maybe that'll help.
Okay. There you go. Let me comment, though, Stephen, on what you're saying, too. And again, not to monopolize this particular show. Here's the interesting thing. You, myself, Dennis, and so many people have had friends over the years that have gone through the process to become an American citizen. And many of them took years. We're talking 7, 8, 9 years, whatever. And I have personal experience with this from friends. And they took a test. And that test, to be very honest with everybody listening, I don't know, and I have to polish myself up on my Constitution too. I'm not perfect. Those questions were very, very technical and very difficult for many. So here, why don't we do this? Why don't we have an opportunity to make every citizen of America go back to the classroom and recertify as an American citizen by passing a test? But that seems so ludicrous when we're letting hundreds of thousands of people in here, violating the very oath that the people who are president and the other people who took an oath. And how ludicrous is that when none of those people may have an allegiance to America? It's seriously wrong.
It's extremely ludicrous. Not only is that, it defies common sense and everything. It defies all logic and reason, really.
Right.
I mean, when I hear people say, "Oh, defend our democracy," and I see the mainstream media talking about it as if it's a democracy. Well, no, it's a constitutional republic, folks.
Right.
There's a difference. We the people delegate the powers to the state, then from the state goes up to the federal level, and so on and so forth. Not the other way around.
You're 100%
Is it
right.
possible?
And then look at it this way: when you go to vote, there should be, in my opinion, no disagreement on not being able to show identification.
I know.
But that's not even the bigger part of the problem. The problem is they're looking to make people that aren't even citizens voting.
Oh my God, it's
and
insane.
Isn't that a bigger slap in the face?
Yeah.
When you have people who are taking money from taxpayers that do not deserve a damn red cent.
I saw a social media post on Twitter the other day. Somebody trying to like gaslight people into, to trick people into thinking that, and it was so obvious to me because they were all like, "Do you think my illegal immigrants should be allowed to vote?" And then they were going on about somebody trying to stop that, with trying to make sure that only people that are actually citizens can vote. Which is how it should be, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But yes. I was just kind of like dumbfounded. Are people really that oblivious to what's going on here?
Yeah,
I'm not.
And they are. And here's the problem. Don't just blame the politicians. I hate to be so negative here at the beginning of a new year, but I think we have a serious cancer growing on whether or not there's so many people that are true Americans. And what's that? A true American to me is somebody who stands up for the beliefs of America, yes, supports our Constitution, and understands what it is to be an American.
Absolutely.
But how dare you say those things in legacy media where there's no right or wrong, and 1 and 1 has just magically appeared to be equal to 3 instead of 2.
I know. It's I mean, I never imagined we'd be where we're at now. Like if you'd asked me 5-10 years ago, would I ever imagine us being in this kind of a situation? I would have said not a chance in hell. I never would have even fathomed it.
I have a question for both of you. Is it possible that we do not have a constitution at this time? It has been suspended by the organs of power.
I think it's been ignored. No, it's
ignored
because we have a constitution. In other words, it's like something you can visit in Washington and see it behind the Capitol behind glass. But it should be a working constitution. And look, let me not sound like an overt nationalist here. Look, I said before at the top of your show, I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I used to lean toward Republican, but I will also kick pants on the Republicans too, for doing many things that they don't do enough to fight back what the Democrats are doing. And if they have a slim majority in the House, why are we not able to defeat some of these things that the Democrats are doing? But let me go back to common sense. That's why I say I'm a common sense conservative. And here's why. I have no hate for anybody, race, color, or creed. Come into this country and do it the right way to earn it. Because I feel very concerned about what could happen. How stupid can we be when we let people in that we have no vetting process?
Right.
Could it be that they're theoretical terrorists? I don't want to sound alarmist, but let me say this. The first time that happens, and it's blamed on the fact that illegals had done it, there needs to be a complete revision of this whole government.
I agree.
And you know what people should do? Here, I never understood this. If you're tired of seeing your tax dollars spent, I wouldn't say I'm going to be a tax protester, but why don't many companies just refuse to pay taxes? What are they going to do? Put every single company in this country in jail?
That's a good
idea. Because you're violating the Constitution? Common sense.
Yeah, the very common sense. I love the way you put that as a common sense conservative. I think I may start using that term. See, myself,
yeah,
I'm an independent. I started out as a Democrat in the early 2000s, and then when the whole Benghazi thing happened, I was just disgusted by it. And I was like, I want no part of this. So I kind of went toward being independent. But I'm very, very, I'm a critical thinker. I use rational thought. I put together what makes sense, what doesn't, and I go and I base my beliefs and my opinions on that. And so it's, doing this alternate media work that I've done the last couple of years, just the last couple of years that I've been doing it really heavily. People assume that I'm a conservative because of the kind of content I'm putting out. No,
Right.
it's not the case at all. I'm putting out what I'm finding with the evidence, and it just so happens that that's it. A lot of it, and people get triggered and they want to say this or that, but no, it's not the case at all. My own family was personally affected by the lockdowns and the you know what I'm talking about. And so that's a big reason why I'm in this fight. Yeah, correct.
Right. But Stephen, I got to add something else, and I don't want to cut Dennis off here, but I'm full of vigor here, and I have a lot of energy on this. Here we go. Think about when I'll be 68 later this month, okay? I'm older than many of the younger generation, obviously. But here's the point I'm trying to make. In school, I went to a lot of Catholic schools during my education, okay? Right or wrong. Nothing was perfect. But the art of debate now has become demonized. At least in those days, whether you wanted to be in the auditorium, you sat there and listened to two sides of an issue.
Right.
I don't remember people throwing shoes, throwing bricks, lighting fires, and starting a riot.
Or getting triggered.
But now, you brought up something interesting, Stephen. You brought up something interesting. Critical thinking is missing. So let me jump on another subject here.
It is, you're right.
This whole asinine, insane concept of climate change that's being shoved down everybody's throat. Listen, I'm not a polluter. I don't expect people to go out and throw, garbage in the streets. I believe what Theodore Roosevelt had as a main tenet. It was conservation.
Yes.
Now we have this whole thing. If you don't believe in climate change, I'm a scientist who knows the sun. I know the solar cycles. All weather comes from the sun. So let me be brief. You cannot have an open conversation in many of academic locations today if you sound even slightly off measure against the doctrine that climate change is a settled issue. And if you don't believe it, you need to be burned to the ground or put on trial like Galileo or burned at the stake like Giordano Bruno was.
Yep.
For non-belief that the earth was the center of the universe, not the sun. Very sad.
It's obvious to me. I mean, just based on what we know of the HARP technologies and stuff going back. My dad was a chemist in the Army during the Vietnam War. He was stationed here in the States, and they had him making Agent Orange during that time. I mean, he passed away in 2002. God rest his soul. He was also a medical doctor for many years, which is a big reason why I know that whole CV-19 thing was a big freaking one of the biggest frauds of our time, I believe, in a lot of ways. And
still is.
My point being is the climate change thing. I see. Okay, I'm in Vegas, and over the last 7-8 years, at least actually it's been 10 already. Since 2013, every 3 summers there was some brief storm that would come in out of nowhere, come and go in less than an hour. It would uproot signs, trees. I mean, and it was like clockwork. And I become convinced they were using us as a testing ground. And it stopped. The last one was like 2017, and then the next thing is all of the CV-19 lockdowns happen. But I'm convinced that that's what they're doing. They're using that as their convincing factor to convince people that climate change is happening, when in reality it's them manipulating the weather through cloud seeding and other technologies that we've had for decades.
Well, there's a whole thing called geoengineering.
Yes.
I mean, that would be shows that you could do for hours. But here, in the brief time that we have with you gentlemen today and this evening, I'm just going to add to this as a science person. All weather comes from the sun. If you look at the cycles of weather over the course of time in the earth, one of the largest polluters to add carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide to the atmosphere is the incredible proliferation of volcanic activity. So I'm not saying to people, please hear me out, folks, and hear me out as not an angry person, that this whole climate change subject matter is more of a global control issue.
It is.
And I want no part of it. Here's why. I don't pollute. I try to do what I can to recycle things. I get it. But don't make it a religion in which, if I'm not a participant to believe in that whole theory or that religious dogma, I'm not going to have a social credit score someday like they do in communist China,
Right.
or I'm going to be deprived of my ability to get the best food, lodging, or travel capability because I'm not a believer. And obviously, critical thinking should be at the forefront of the conversation.
It absolutely should be 100%. And I mean, I don't know how we've gotten away from it because I mean, I remember when I was in high school, we still had some element of that. I'm considered I consider myself a Gen Xer. I was born in '83,
Yes.
and so I remember. I think my generation is one of the last ones to grow up without internet, so we still remember what it was like to learn real history to some degree, and to know what critical thinking is. And then I look at my sister's generation, who's like 11 years younger than me, and it's completely different, and it's like, wow, we have a big bridge to gap.
Yes, I have.
Sure do.
Yes, Stephen. I'm both of you. I want to ask another question. It appears to me that the things we're talking about center in both state government and federal government. The two-party system that was created here from the beginning. I've just reviewed the Civil War of 1860 with Lincoln. The Whigs became the Republicans. Now we have a system in government in DC and in these state capitals where it's almost like we have a uniparty, one party, with two factions. And they operate in their own interests or the interests that they feel that will provide them rather than the people the support necessary. When you have kids being stolen from families for $200,000 a year on each child, and you have women being incarcerated in nursing homes and no accountability on the part of the judiciary, including the judges, we have a big problem here. So the thing that I am saying is that I believe that if we have a one-party system, then we need to create a two-party system. And that's where the American Party of America, the American National Committee comes in. We are the family first. If you're not fighting for your family, who are you working for? I have written 64 books on this area of the family, the government, the economics, the banking system, and actually taking many of the initiatives President Kennedy had created during his short term in office to the max so that we have a chance not only to survive, but thrive. And Steve, you say it so well, Steve Cates, Dr. Sky, with regard to your observations and your interest in subject matter that the general public has seemed to pass on or duck on, and yet it's so true. And I have to let our audience know, Steve Cates, that provided for me personally the support necessary at that time during the period in 2005 when my own mother was mugged, shaken down through a guardianship in Phoenix, Arizona, that put me back in the game from once I started this in 1995 when the Clintons were in the White House. What say you?
Well, I mean, Stephen, Dennis gives me credit for actually moving his campaign forward. And I want to go in a very light mode here, not to take full credit. Dennis has said many times from our experiences with the Call to Right show, it propelled him to move on to be a candidate for president of the United States.
It did.
This is interesting. This is very interesting. There are so many things that this radio show, in the time allocated, obviously you'd have to do thousands of these shows like you guys do. But here's the point that I want to make as a conservative, common sense individual. Again, I have no hatred for anybody. I'm not running for any political office. I support what Dennis is doing because I think we need fresh blood and fresh ideas.
Amen.
But I want to point my finger at the general population that doesn't understand the whole basis of why America is America. You cannot have a country that has support for itself and believe in the beliefs of American, exceptionalism, if you have people that don't give a crap about what's going on about this country. They don't know anything about why it's here.
Right.
Exactly.
You make such a valid point. You're absolutely right there, 100%. Because I mean, we're in a situation where, oh man, it seems like stupidity is rampant. Like it's like they're trying to get us to be that stupid and that divided, so we don't understand the issues, so that we are distracted, so they can get away with what they are actually doing, which is pretty much treason and a whole lot more. I believe, in my opinion.
Right. Now, who's going to stop it? So, in other words,
Right.
look, let's throw out the political forecast here for 2024. Dennis is striving and getting, more and more people to understand what the American Party of America is about. That's wonderful, and that's very commendable. But as you look at it right now, you see a Biden-Trump rematch,
Mm-hmm.
and here's the problem here. With more illegal people coming in and the propensity to have them vote when they should have no right at all to do it, how do you survive as a nation without this incredible change that's coming? Because people are hot under the collar on this, right?
Yep. 100% they are. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And I pray, and I say this, I pray humbly that there's not going to be violence, but I think, hey, I'm a common sense conservative. You start pissing off a lot of people
Yeah.
that believe in America and are totally ridiculously taxed out, lied to, made to pay taxes, or else they'll go to jail when they themselves are violating the thing of a whole constitution, and they're deciding to just say, you better do what we say. Well, it's insanity.
It is insanity. And they're going to have one hell of a fucking, excuse my language, freaking fight on their hand. Sorry,
Well,
justifiable rage, a huge fight on their hands if they keep going down that road. And I'm not going to stand for it. I know you won't, Dennis.
right, but here, Stephen, here's the real reality. Here's the real reality, and I'm no radical at all, okay? I would rather sit down with both sides, talk, and try to negotiate.
I would too.
But the track record of the other side, who is the other side? Not just Democrats. How can you come to the table to discuss solutions to issues if you have no civility in the process?
Exactly.
What is it going to be? Violence? If people don't get their way? So here's an issue. Here's an issue that's very scary. You have people in America right now, not everybody. Hey, I'm not perfect. I should go back and study my Constitution and know more. But in common sense conservatism, things that are not right, you get a feeling.
Yes.
And I wonder how many of these people out there are really willing to risk what they do every day, seeing this country go down the drain. Most people, look, are a couple of paychecks from insolvency. Their fault, that's maybe not their fault. Okay? I'm not perfect either, but here, most people can't jump up and fight the fight. And what kind of fight? I'm not talking about a violent fight. Here's the problem. They're so busy in their work world by a lot of corporations that become a slave to owner relationship, and they're so entrenched in their world, you can't blame them.
No,
they have children, they have mortgages. So how do you get away from this to do something when too many people are like, hey, I can't get involved. I can't do anything. So what do you do?
I think you have to be very vigilant and decide you're going to become educated in the things that you don't understand or know. And that's why I'm here, Steve. I am producing knowledge, a knowledge platform for people to jump into, get educated, and then decide it's time to get into politics, win elections, and change the system from within. I've got a book called The Ball Doctrine, Creating Peace and Prosperity in Every Nation. I am not a politician. I am a scholar. And the realities are the United Nations, 192 nations, Steve, 192 nations need to read the Ball Doctrine. Why? Because the Ball Doctrine talks about creating a middle class in every nation. And for people out here who say that we don't know what we're talking about, I challenge anybody to debate me on the merits and the value and the virtue of creating a middle class for the families of this planet.
Right, but here I want to say, I want to make a disclaimer here on your show. the comments that Steve Cates has provided to your platform here today, Stephen, and to Dennis, are his opinions, solely his opinions, and not necessarily, as they say in other radio shows, that of owners, management, and whatever. Right. And I'm kidding on that.
We have a disclaimer at the very beginning that we read before we even start. So,
and I'm going to say it for myself personally, because not that I'm afraid that some nefarious agency of the government is going to think that I'm a distant January 6th protester. Hardly. It's that if you could sit Alejandro Mayorkas in a one-on-one conversation, how could you get him to admit, which you couldn't, that everything he claims is a secure border is a total fantasy in something called clown world? It's so ridiculous.
Yep.
Even a 7-year-old and maybe a 5-year-old that are pretty smart little kids out there.
A 2-year-old with 2 brain cells could put that together. I mean, in my opinion.
So there is something inherently wrong with exactly how they're laying this out. So who's the checker to the checker? In other words, who then is the one that's going to administer some sort of justice to this whole insanity? Who?
It's certainly not going to be the ones doing it. It's going to be the ones doing it or perpetrating what they're doing.
People don't know their Constitution.
Right.
And if the legacy media, which they won't stop, keep talking about how a democracy is being squeezed, and every time you hear Biden on the stage, he's talking in the most hateful rhetoric. He's not bringing the country together.
Nope, he's not.
He's further dividing, making the chasm bigger and bigger.
He is, absolutely.
I want to say this. It is the people, Steve, that's going to be the difference. This is not about me, you, or Steve Phillips. This is about we, the people. That's why it's so important that people read what I have written. And I say that not because I'm trying to be grandiose about this, but the facts are, when you're talking about a living wage job that will provide the support for a family, you cannot support a family on minimum wage. That means you've got to have skilled labor, education, and jobs that will support the family structures so that not only can they survive, but they can thrive. And dealing with the income tax situation, as we both know, and what President Kennedy did in '63, and all the issues with the Federal Reserve, and how they print money out of nothing, and nothing to back it up and create debt, and then people are put in this position. It's all wrong. We need to have a completely
we know that, Dennis. We know that. And Stephen, you know that. But here's the other side of the coin on this.
That's why I started this
very dangerous. This is very dangerous because here, you cannot just blame the politicians. They're slick and very smart. They'll tell anybody whatever they think they want to hear. Now, think about this. Look at California Governor Newsom. He stands up and does a debate with Governor DeSantis of Florida, right? And he's there talking about this total liberal leftist mentality. We as Americans, really, in this man's opinion, my opinion, we don't want to see California become the whole, business plan and political plan of America. It can't survive.
No, it can't. It's ultimately.
It can't.
It's ultimately.
You have to blame people who are ignorant or on some kind of, stimulant drug, which, by the way, is another subject. Dennis, you're right. You're doing a great job. Stephen, I don't know you that well, but God bless you for doing your show. Absolutely. But look, here's another interesting thing. I spent time in a law enforcement role here in Arizona. Okay, 20-some years with Sheriff Joe Arpaio. He's not perfect. He gets attacked in many ways for discrimination against certain types of, ethnic groups. Okay, I'm not going to take on that right now. But here's an interesting thing. We would round up people for marijuana and drug abuse, right? Now the state of Arizona has realized, because the people wanted it, that marijuana is legal. But here we go. As a person who understands firearms and firearm regulations, it is blatantly illegal on the ATFE form called the 4473. if you perjure yourself because you cannot be a possessor or purchase a firearm, if you admit to using marijuana, even in the medical regard. So what does Arizona do? The people in this democracy subject, where they voted on the proposition, look at what the state's doing. When it was illegal to have drugs like marijuana, now they're raking in billions of dollars in tax revenue. In addition, gentlemen, to what sports betting was considered to be a no-no, maybe not prosecuted like drug abuse. Look at how much money the states are making on these two, in my opinion, two very addictive things that they tried to enforce and stop in the past.
Absolutely.
Who's
making money and never pissed.
Right. Who's the consumer of this? The general public, for the most part. And if they didn't buy it or they didn't bet on these sports games, then they wouldn't have the revenue that they're raking in. So it all goes back to the people.
Yep.
Since when is marijuana a great thing? Now, wait, hold on. There are people in this radio audience that would want to have my head because they're saying, well, wait a minute, I smoke it to reduce my pain. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you drive past a dispensary and there are more people outside the dispensary than a day when one of the food bank, locations is giving out free food for people. I mean, I've seen hundreds of people waiting outside a marijuana dispensary.
You make a really, really good point. You make a really great point, man.
Yeah.
Well, you're right, Steve. And I keep thinking about other things like the lotteries. People, invest in those, the Powerball, the Mega Millions, and the state lotteries, and those different things. But the real abuse is coming from taking and getting federal monies from stealing children. My attitude is the federal government should give money to the states and leave the children alone. They're harming so much harm to our country by their behavior. And this has to stop. We have to communicate. One thing I will say, Steve, is that during the elections of 1860, when Lincoln and the Whigs changed to the Republican Party, slavery and plantation ownership was very much alive because the Negro slaves were the labor that did the cotton picking, sorted out the cotton flowers, made it so that the cotton could be processed into textile fabrics. We, as a nation, were going in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and those cash crops in South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia, not too far from where I'm sitting right now, was a big deal. And of course, when you see what's going on now in our own society with the illegal immigration and the theft of children and the incarceration of senior citizens, particularly females, through probate courts, which at one time were used as slave courts during the 1860s, we have a repeat of history here. And we know that those who will not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Now, I happen to be a a major. I graduated with a history degree.
No, let me say this. And gentlemen, I want you to know I'm still hearing that horrible feedback, but I'm trying to do the best I can here. Because every time I say something, I'm hearing it back in my headphone here.
It's probably because of the method that I'm using to run the call line through, but we'll get that situated for next time so that there's no issues.
No. And again, no complaint. It's just that I want these points to come out so I'm not stepping on somebody else, either of you gentlemen, that want to say something. It's hard to, there's no way to know. Okay, so for me to wrap this up, I just say thank you for having me here on your program. Dennis, I've always supported your third-party candidacy with all the vigor that you put into it and all the things you do.
It has to happen, Steve.
Never but. I look at a dangerous part in American history when I see young people who have absolutely no knowledge of what our whole country is about.
Exactly.
Why
Me too.
we stand for what we stand and what we stand for. And the further we go into this wokeism, and I look at it this way, I have to point my finger at a lot of these corporations.
Yeah, it's a lot
because
of the corporations.
it's becoming something in this world, a phenomenon called transhumanism. More and more of us in the corporate world are starting to move into the transhumanism kind of movement. What's that? Where there's a rejection of God, a rejection of critical thinking and common sense, and moving down a path where we become slaves to the system or worshiping the God of AI or the computer.
Yep.
And it's very dangerous.
It is. And I'm a tech guy by trade. I'm in the IT field. I've been a software engineer for 24 plus years, at least since 98. So coming from me, I 100% agree with you wholeheartedly, 100%, and I will never put tech inside my body because I know how easily it can be hacked. I've been doing this a very long time, and coming from me, that should say a lot to our viewers because he's
I agree.
Right.
I mean, it's good to hear that, Stephen. But let me say this, you know better.
I do know better.
If you look at the dark side of AI, sometime we can have a conversation of what I think, way off subject, when we talk about this extraterrestrial existence.
Well, we have another
very quickly
show that we do that kind of subject matter on called the News for Us, a World of Fringe Division podcast. So
I'd be happy to comment on that. But going back to what we're talking about today in closing, we're looking at a world here where people are either so overly medicated, they don't want to hear the truth, and wokeism is becoming almost a standard way of having to deal with, living every day. Imagine this. A 67-year-old guy like myself would probably have a hard time working for any corporation in an office. Why? Because of an allegation of maybe somebody saying in a Me Too commentary that I assaulted verbally somebody, a female or male, right? Not only do you have to do your job that you're rated on in your performance rating, but you have to ascribe to the whole rule of the road of office politics in the woke world.
Yep.
So how do you survive in an environment like that? Like you have two jobs every day.
Steve, I want to say this in closing here. We want you back. We'll have you back. Situation being that the World Economic Forum, this Klaus Schwab. I know you've had people on your show with the Call to Rights. The gentleman out of New York who does the trends. Now we have
Gerald Salente.
Yes, Gerald Fonte. We have another gentleman. His name is Howard Nema. Very intelligent gentleman. HowardNema.com. Let me say this: Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum. As far as I'm concerned, he is a Nazi.
Oh, he is.
The way his father was a Nazi. The World Economic Forum is a Nazi group. And what they have done is by subtlety with the people with the money, like the Bilderbergs, the Rothschilds, the Gettys, the Rockefellers, and these oligarchs like Bill Gates and others like him. They have created this forum where the leaders of the world are their employees.
Capture.
But let me say this in closing, and I know I have to leave as you wrap up a show here.
Yes, I know you do.
Say this. Again, with no anger or hatred to anybody, I just want the government and other corporate entities to keep their dirty hands off of me with vaccines, ridiculous mandates that violate the tenets of the U.S. Constitution. As a common sense conservative, I will never buy into that or the wokeism. Hold on, I think the world would be such a wonderful place, as I'm a dreamer too, if we lived by the golden rule, don't you think?
Yep. Definitely. Oh my goodness, for sure.
You want to be treated and do no harm.
Definitely.
So there you go, gentlemen.
Well, and then Steve, like I said, we will have you back. This transhumanism, it's in the World Economic Forum. A man by the name of Yuri Noah Harari. He is a Jewish bioengineer. He wants to change the DNA.
I know
of
who you're talking about.
I know who
and
you're talking about. That POS.
he is.
Well, here
a
we go.
POS.
Yeah, I got it. But
And
Dennis,
he
let me
wants to
finish with my
change the
last closing
DNA
comment here.
so that people will not
Proud American.
resist their
I'm a
orders.
proud American who believes in our country.
As a man.
And every day, if I were president, I would wake up with almost tears in my eyes, knowing the many souls that gave their lives for what we call freedom,
Right.
not democracy. And that would be something that every day I would honor that legacy and almost trepidate that I would be so humble to try to carry the torch of America and do the best I could. But I'm not president. I'm just a common sense conservative.
I do that myself every day. I have a little mantra that I do, and I watch a few inspirational videos that remind me of that every day. And I, before my uncle died a couple of years back, when I first started doing this podcast and work, I was speaking with him, and he was in the Vietnam War. He's of a different generation, but he was like, I don't understand what's happening. What did I fight for? Was it all in vain? And I told him, no, Uncle, it wasn't. My generation finished this, and he said, I hope so. And I told him, I know so. And these ideals that our Constitution has, and what was set forth in our Constitution,
Very
are
good.
dear to me.
All right, we have 1 minute left.
Gentlemen, I
Steve.
wish you a happy new year.
Yes.
Move on, but
Sounds good.
always remember
We'll
those
have
that
you
gave
back,
their lives to the greatest country
soon,
in the world. American exceptionalism should be taught
It should.
and respected.
Listen to Steve, people. He's the man.
Thank you,
we're
everyone,
all
for
the
joining
man
us.
here.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Dennis. Have a good day.
You
You
too.
bet. God bless.
Bye.
All right, folks. That was Dr. Sky, Stephen Cates. So that was great show, wasn't it? That was powerful. I love that word. That was amazing.
It is. We have powerful people coming more and more and more, and I'm excited. And this is what it's about. And I will not stop fighting for you people, because our children and our nation and those who have fought and died for it are worth fighting for. Praise God.
And don't forget to check out Dennis's new book, Full Disclosure, We Are Not Alone, on Amazon. He just released it at the end of the
my land. Woo!
And we're going to be doing a show on our Fringe Division podcast on this.
All right, buddy.
Stay tuned, folks.
Nice. Thank you, Stephen.
With that being said, let me play our outro, and then we'll wrap it up.
All right.
Check us out, everybody. Thank you for joining us. All right.